Hey guys, welcome back to another In Depth with our CEO, Omar Sabek, here at Sasco Digital Assets. I'm Keren Margolis, and today we're getting into a really juicy one. Is Bitcoin bad for the environment? And I want to point out that here at Sasco, we're so green. We have a wall made of plants. So we get it. Like, we get the environmental concern. In our Bitcoin bite-size video, we talked about Bitcoin's energy use being an actual feature of the network and not a bug or a flaw. What does that actually mean?
So we talk about, we're going to get a lot into proof of work. Proof of work is the name of the economic system within Bitcoin that gives it, that gives the miners the incentive to mine Bitcoin. It's the work that needs to happen for Bitcoin to be created.
So, okay. Proof of work has to do with the system of mining Bitcoins. What is it proof of?
Proof of work is the internal code-based mechanism within the Bitcoin network that rewards miners for the work that they're doing. So the miners are working for Bitcoin,
right?
And in return, they get Bitcoin as a proof of their work, and that Bitcoin becomes the proof, and anyone can validate it on the blockchain, but it becomes a proof that somewhere, at some time, someplace in the world, miners took their mining equipment, the energy, and they created Bitcoin. That's the proof of work. And you can apply that to gold. The proof of work for an ounce of gold is that, you hold it in your hand and you see that it's an ounce of gold. And at some point in time, that gold is mined from the earth. And it's hard to mine gold. It's hard to mine Bitcoin. But that's what gives it value, that someone took the risk, the time, the energy, the effort to create that, so that we can then take our time and our energy, our labor output, and store it in that good.
So you're telling me that the Bitcoins themselves, the Bitcoins, not the network, but the things, those are the proof of work? Those are the proof that they've been mined?
Exactly. It's a proof that that miners came together to mine that Bitcoin. You got it.
And in order to have that proof of work, so in order to produce the Bitcoin, to have that as your end result deliverable of mining, mm-hmm. you need to expend energy on purpose.
Exactly.
So the system was set up so that mining has to take energy.
It has to take energy because at the end of the day, fundamentally, money is energy. Money is energy. When we're working for money and we get money, when we get, whether it's cash or whether we take that cash and convert it into something that holds value for longer, we're really storing that energy that we outputted into something that can carry it over time and space. And that's why gold has historically been a great store of value. When we're talking about value, we're talking about time and we're talking about energy.
Right.
A can of soda that's all the energy that went into all those workers in the factory making that can of Coke. For $1, you get to enjoy that can of Coke. The proof of work that's a real can of Coke and not some counterfeit is when it hits your tongue and you know it's soda. You know it's Coca-Cola, right? That is fundamentally how we, throughout human history, how we valued, goods that are really good stores of value compared to other goods.
But why does money have to cost money, right? So when you think about fiat money, like the dollar, the government can print that, and it feels like the government can do that for free. So does that mean that the dollar is worthless?
This is very recent. So only since 1971, when the government, when the central bank Richard Nixon removed the peg between the dollar and gold, did it become very easy to print U.S. dollars. But before that, it had to be pegged to gold, and gold is very hard to produce.
Right.
So you either mine for the gold and spend a lot of energy to get that gold, or you buy it on an open market, just like you can with Bitcoin. So it's kind of similar. But to answer your question, it has to be hard to produce, because if it was easy, it would be worthless, right? If it was easy, then anybody could do it.
But anybody can do it, right? Anybody can theoretically set up a Bitcoin node, become a miner, invest in a mining rig, which we'll get to.
Yep.
So
anybody can do it, but as more and more people do it, again, it becomes more and more competitive, and the risks go up. But yes, it's permissionless in the terms in the sense that you could buy a miner, I could buy a miner, we can connect it to the internet, we can connect it to power, and we're getting Bitcoin. The Bitcoin network is not going to stop anybody from doing it. We could be a government, we could be a bank, we could be individuals, we could be anybody who we want. Bitcoin doesn't care.
The Bitcoin network is blind to who actually it is that's doing this.
Exactly. But it's still difficult in the sense of the amount of energy required. And what we're doing when we're buying a miner is the miner is doing the work for us. So instead of us digging for gold, we have a miner that's digging for Bitcoin, in effect.
Right. So Bitcoin, we mentioned that Bitcoin, it does use objectively a significant amount of energy, right? That can't be disputed. We said as much as a small country, and that's true, right? So that's fair enough. But Bitcoin also has a special relationship to renewable energy specifically.
Yes.
What is that?
So if we think about mining as a business, all businesses have input costs, and in exchange for the input costs, something happens and then they make money, right, by selling a product or selling a service. The biggest input cost for a Bitcoin miner is energy.
What about the hardware itself? I mean, mining. What is a mining rig? What is
a
the
mining
actual
rig?
thing?
You would buy a computer. It's a very specialized computer. It's a computer designed to perform just incredibly complex calculations very quickly. So it's actually going through what's called a namespace very quickly to identify and to provide back the answer to a question that's being posed by the Bitcoin network. And in exchange, it gets the block reward. Right now, that block reward is 6.25 Bitcoins. And it keeps doing that. It's competing with other miners around the world on a network. It's competing with them for that block reward.
So you have this really highly specialized equipment that obviously costs money. In fact, for some people, it's going to be a prohibitive amount of money. So you have to, put in this upfront cost. And then you have the cost of energy, which is a greater input cost than even that.
Over time, it becomes a greater, yeah. So let's say you buy a mining rig today for $10,000.
Okay.
You connect it to the network. And the idea is that you want to determine when you're going to be able to break even.
Right.
What's keeping you from breaking even is, or what's, the biggest determining factor in when you break even is the cost of your energy.
Okay.
So when I first looked at mining, it was 8 years ago. It was 2013. I live in Connecticut. I looked at the cost of energy in Connecticut. It's probably the highest in the country.
No kidding.
Yeah, because we get service from a plant over here in the next town over in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and it's coal. It's coal powered.
Okay.
So it's very expensive.
Right.
And why is it coal powered? It's because it was built a long time ago, and there's no kind of natural resources that are nearby because it's a pretty old population center, being in the greater New York City area. And that coal has to be brought in. So you got to pay the logistical, the shipping cost for that coal to be brought in on barges. Right. And it's right on the water. So it gets barged in and consumed within a plant. That plant produces this, dirty fuel.
That's so much.
And so I would have been profitable, but not as profitable if I opened up in, let's say, the Tennessee Valley Authority, right, where it's, very cheap and abundant hydroelectric, or other places in America like Kentucky where they have, cheap energy, Washington State, where they use hydroelectric power, as the primary source of energy, because renewable energy sources are always the cheapest because they're whether it's wind, solar, or electric, it's generated on site. And if you have a Bitcoin miner, there's no family associated with that. So that Bitcoin miner could be sent anywhere in the world where there's cheap and abundant energy. And that's the way, actually 60 to 70% of the energy used to mine Bitcoin come from renewable sources.
And do you think that proportion is going to go up? It seems like it would be naturally incentivized to do that because of normal market forces.
Exactly. It's absolutely incentivized to do that. It's incentivized to go up, especially in places that have, very cheap and abundant. We see it in El Salvador where they have volcanoes and they're using the steam from the volcanoes to mine or to power equipment that can mine the Bitcoin. We see it in Iceland, cheap geothermal.
Right.
The nice thing about Iceland is that you don't have to pay for cooling costs to cool off the miners because it's naturally in a cool environment. So they could just open the windows and put some fans into the environment to cool it down. And yeah, it's a general trend. But that trend could also be accelerated by carbon taxes. If there was a carbon tax that was applied to heavy users of fossil fuels, or incentives to miners that are using renewable sources of energy. Mm-hmm. So there's ways that it could speed it up. But yes, generally speaking, eventually all miners have to be on renewable because that is the cheapest and most profitable way to get Bitcoin.
And then the Bitcoin network, the whole thing, miners also have a special relationship to energy efficiency, right? In addition to specifically the source of the energy, the renewability of the energy, that there is a use for all energy where before it might have been wasted. How does that work?
So if we think about remote areas that have, let's say, hydroelectric power plants, those power plants might have been built to service local industries. For example, in Canada, in Saskatchewan, you have aluminum smelters, you have sawmills that are powered by hydroelectric power plants, but in many of those cases, they're underutilized. So they're only using maybe 20 or 30% in some cases
of the power that they're
from the hydroelectric. And so you have an opportunity where, 70 to 80% can be used for other purposes like Bitcoin mining. And so if you're a power company, instead of wasting that energy, you can use that energy to power your miners and potentially subsidize the cost of energy through that technique, or at least use Bitcoin as a tool to give you some optionality. Mm-hmm. And there's some power plants that are looking into that right now, and they're doing it in Ukraine. There's a nuclear power plant that's actually building as part of their power plant Bitcoin miners.
No kidding.
To use the excess energy that they're going to be generating.
That's so
to create Bitcoins. Yeah, and so there's this whole economic system that Bitcoin enables around energy that is that we're starting to see happen, which is very fascinating.
Is that unique to Bitcoin? I mean, this could be my ignorance, but I don't know of another industry that is so incentivized to push forward energy efficiency and renewables over fossil fuels as Bitcoin. Bitcoin is such a 24/7 consumer of energy. Is there an analog to anything else?
No, and I think the reason why it's very unique to Bitcoin is because it's a direct input. Energy is a direct input into the miners, and it's as simple as that. So if you have a direct input, you could talk about gold mining, but there's a disambiguation there, right? Mm-hmm. Because the energy has to turn into other things that have to happen to get the gold out of the ground. And even when they're getting gold out of the ground, there's like a yield. The numbers are crazy. You need 20 tons of rock to get a couple of ounces of gold.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Incredibly wasteful process, if you ask me.
And incredibly damaging. I mean, like the mercury and all of that stuff that you hear
Arsenic,
about. And there's nowhere for it to go, and they need permission to put it here and there, and it's destroying disadvantaged population areas in the Amazon rainforest and whatever.
Absolutely. It's incredibly damaging to the environment. And I think that it's interesting and curious that we don't see people necessarily talking about that or other industries that use a lot of energy.
Well, why do you think that is? Is this sort of like the devil kind of thing where it's, we're so used to it that it doesn't really bear mention and Bitcoin's so new?
I don't know. I think there's just, when these things make headlines, how often do you see people really digging into the details of these things? It's hard to say.
And to be fair, that's why we're here. It's not always obvious how to dig into the details of this. The details aren't always so accessible to people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely, I 100% agree with you.
I mean, you're the one who taught me that the amount of energy that the Bitcoin network actually uses is a feature and not a bug. You told me, and now we're telling you.
That's what makes it hard sound money. That's what makes it money you could trust. The fact that it does take, it takes risk, it takes investment capital, and it takes ongoing energy to secure the network, to create the Bitcoins. And because of all of those put together, you can really trust that money.
So that's interesting. So when because I've heard this from like casual Instagram followers who are telling me, well, Bitcoin, it's not really money. It's not really currency. But you're saying actually the fact that it costs money to make this money can give us confidence that it is money.
Yeah, because there's no way to circumvent it.
Right.
So there's no way to counterfeit it. There's no way to get around proof of work. It's designed to ensure that that if you read the code and you understand the code and you can and you know that these inputs are happening on the network and it's producing Bitcoin and you can trust that and it's verifiable by math. Mm-hmm. Then there's no one, there's really no one to argue in terms of whether this thing was created from value or not created from value. And there's never been a time in human history that money wasn't created through a difficult process.
Let's actually answer the question. We're saying, is Bitcoin bad for the environment? And some people can make a case for yes, and that's fair enough. I mean, you can say traditional banking is bad for the environment. It uses 10 times the amount of energy. You could say anything. The internet's bad for the environment. Cars are bad for the environment. And those are fair points. But what's the actual story here if we zoom out? So not just is Bitcoin good or bad for the environment, but what is its relationship to the environment as a whole, to the world?
You raise a couple of very good points here, right? No one talks about other things that are bad for the environment and make a determination as to whether they have value or no value, right? I mean,
Not like this. Not
the whole
quite like
the whole judgment on Bitcoin being bad for the environment or taking up too much energy is predicated on the belief that it has no value.
Right.
But it has a lot of value. And objectively speaking, people are using it to transact. If it didn't have value, people wouldn't use it to transact.
Right.
So if there's no transactions, then it will just go away and
Problem solved.
That would be it. Yeah, that would be it. We don't talk about cruise ships, the whole cruise industry and how much energy they use. We don't talk about other sources, and I'm not advocating that we do. I just think it's curious that it only is applied to Bitcoin, and I think people should just think about what that means. As far as what it means, what was your question?
The question is what's the part of the story that we're missing here when we ask, is Bitcoin bad for the environment? Because seems like a straightforward yes or no question, but it actually, talking to you and having done the research for all these videos, seems to be missing the point.
Right. So if we were to consider the current system that is predicated on fiat currency, right? That's printed by central banks, that is very easy to produce, that's very cheap, that is incentivizing the people that hold it to spend it quickly, because if they hold on to it for a long period of time, it loses its value. So you're incentivized to spend it quickly. If you're incentivized to spend it quickly, you're probably going to spend it on stuff that is, not, low time preference type things. You're going to spend it on consumption. You're going to spend it on goods.
Which
some
ultimately of us love.
Well, and
some of us live to consume.
And it's perfectly fine, but it creates an economic system that ultimately is disastrous for the environment because it's continuous consumerism. And that's the world we're living in right now.
Right. But devil's advocate, so, cheap goods make a higher quality of life possible for some people.
It does. Absolutely. Absolutely. But goods that are higher quality and more durable, maybe not plastic, or better for the environment. I'm not trying to spurse any judgment. I'm just saying what it is.
And so, how does Bitcoin fit into that?
So I think Bitcoin is the opposite. Bitcoin incentivizes its holders to save it because it goes up in value over time. And if you're saving something over time, you're not consuming it as much, and you're able to afford higher quality goods that aren't as disposable. And there's, if we're on a Bitcoin standard, which so theoretical, I would imagine that the world would be a more environmentally friendly place because people would be a lot more cognizant about how they're spending their Bitcoin, and they're spending it when they really need to, and they're spending it on things that are, that are worthwhile to spend it on.
So can you say that Bitcoin is not just, neutral or depends or whatever, but can you say that Bitcoin's actually good for the environment? Can you make that statement?
I would say that Bitcoin it has an economic incentive that ultimately would lead to a better outcome for the environment because it's not as cheap and easy to produce, and because it's not as cheap and easy to produce, you're not going to spend it on things that are disposable or harmful to the environment. Yeah,
which
I would definitely say that.
Do enjoy. And I mean, I want to be clear that we're not
trying to cast any aspersions on any and judge anything here.
On any amazing goods that you might buy, but also that we're not necessarily taking a position here as saying Bitcoin is good for the environment, Bitcoin's bad for the environment.
It's just a different way to think about it. That's all it is. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that wraps it up.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you so much for getting in depth. This is a hot one. It's
a big one. Yeah.
This is a big one.
And it's heady stuff. And it's very complicated stuff.
And it's not just a straightforward yes or no. I think that when people pose this question or it's posed to them, and then you hear just kind of absolute numbers, the entire country of Sri Lanka uses the same amount of energy as the Bitcoin network. It sounds shocking because it's out of context.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's designed that way so that no one can take over the network, so that no country can take over the network, which is, for people to have faith and trust in Bitcoin, you need to make it impervious to any kind of assault. And that's the reason why it's designed that way.
I mean, we almost buried the lead with that. There's one of the main advantages of Bitcoin is how secure it is, how unhackable it is, and the fact that it requires energy on the scale that it does, which is for Bitcoin normal and a built-in feature.
Absolutely.
Actually makes it super
trust
secure.
And security. Absolutely. Trust and security. Because it's so secure, we could trust it.
Right. So that's a lot to chew on.
Yeah.
And hopefully we broke it down for you in a way that is really interesting and easy to understand. It's an interesting debate, and I think that there's stuff to be said on both sides, but it's a little bit more nuanced maybe than...
It's a nuanced conversation, and it requires some disciplines and some understanding. You have to understand energy, you have to understand monetary history and,
Right.
How people, people's behaviors as it relates to storing value over time. And there's a lot of topics here.
And you have to understand how money works. And honestly, we have the luxury of having this discussion right now because we are not among the billions of disenfranchised people that Bitcoin can actually enfranchise.
Yeah, 100%. I think, and it's true. I mean, people that live day to day under these circumstances, they'll hear what we're talking about and it'll absolutely resonate. But, we here where, we're lucky enough to have abundance, thank goodness we don't have to deal with some of the issues that other people around the world have to deal with. And thank goodness that we don't have that firsthand understanding. We can just talk about it and debate these topics from a place of relative comfort. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, and good for people who pose the question too. This is our planet, this is our environment. We should be having these discussions.
Yes.
Good for us.
Absolutely.
Good for us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omar. This was awesome. I haven't watched this video. I think it's gonna be awesome. Thank you so much for watching. This has been our CEO, Omar Sabek. I'm Keren Margolis, as always. Please don't forget to drop us a comment. Let us know what you thought. What did you think about this discussion? What side are you on? Why did you change your mind? Please subscribe to our channel if you're not already subscribed. Hit the notification bell so that you are first to know about all of our new videos. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time.